The bandit expected tears, not resistance. Then the cowboy heard her defiant shout. Montana Territory, the autumn of 1883. Wade Tanner had moved 1,000 head of cattle across this stretch of high plains, and in all those crossings, he had never once heard a woman shout the way she shouted that afternoon. He was a quarter-mile off the stage road, holding the herd loose against a fold in the land while his men ate cold beans, when the first shot cracked flat across the grass. A second followed, then a man's voice, high and ugly, ordering somebody down. Wade had heard road agents work the Cedar Bluffs line before. He knew the shape of it, the stopped coach, the cut traces, the passengers white and shaking, handing over watches and billfolds because a man with a gun and a kerchief over his face owns the world for as long as he points it at you. What he had not heard before was the answer that came back. "You'll have to kill me first. There are children dying." It was a woman's voice, and it did not waver. It carried the way a struck anvil carries, ringing past the willows and out over the open ground to where Wade sat his horse. He went still. The whole crew went still. Then he was moving, swinging the gray around and putting his heels to it, because some sounds a man cannot ride away from no matter how much sense it would make to try. He came up over the rise and saw the coach canted in the road, one wheel in the ditch, the driver slumped and clutching a bloodied arm. 3 riders ringed it, faces masked, and the nearest of them was dragging at a battered black leather bag in the hands of a woman who had planted both heels in the dirt and was hauling back on it with everything she had. She was small. Her hat was gone, her hair half down, and there was blood at her temple. She was losing the bag by inches and she was not letting go. Wade did the only thing the moment allowed. He drew his pistol and fired twice into the air, and he shouted his men up behind him so the road agents would think a posse, and not a single drover with a startled crew. It worked the way bluffs sometimes work on men already nervous. The riders broke, 2 for the timber and 1 snatching one last time at the bag before he gave it up and spurred away. Then the road was quiet, and the woman was standing in the middle of it, breathing hard, the black bag clutched against her chest, looking up at Wade Tanner with gray eyes that had not finished being angry. "You're hurt," he said. "The driver's worse," she answered. "Help me get him down." Her name, he learned, was Carver. Dr. Adeline Carver, though he did not learn the doctor part for some while, because he did not think to ask, and because the territory did not prepare a man to ask it. He got the driver down off the box, and he got the coach hauled out of the ditch with a rope and the gray's weight, and the whole time he was thinking she was a banker's bride or a mine owner's daughter, the kind of Eastern lady who guarded a jewelry case like it held her soul because it likely held her whole dowry. It was the bag that fooled him. A woman who would let herself be dragged through the dirt before she'd surrender a bag. Wade had assumed there was money in it, or gold, or a string of pearls some father had sent west to buy a wedding. He learned otherwise at the station. Della Burke ran the Cedar Bluff stage station with her husband End, and she came out fast when the battered coach rolled in, clucking and gathering the woman up, talking about hot water and clean cloth. But the woman did not let herself be gathered. She set her bag on the station bench, snapped it open, and turned to the driver, who was gray-faced and cradling his arm. "Sit," she told him. "It's out of the socket. This is going to hurt and then it's going to stop hurting. Look at the wall, not at me." Wade watched her run her hands along the man's shoulder the way he might gentle a spooked colt, finding the trouble by feel. Then she braced her small body, twisted, and the joint went back with a sound that made 2 grown station hands wince. The driver gasped, swore, and then breathed properly for the first time since the road. "You're a doctor," Wade said. It came out flat with surprise. "I am." She was already winding a sling. "Philadelphia, and before you say it, yes, a woman, and yes, a real one with the paper to prove it, which I am tired of being asked to show." She glanced up at him and some of the anger went out of her, replaced by something more tired. "That bag is medicine. There's a sickness in this town taking the children. A man wired Philadelphia for help and nobody else came. So it's medicine in that bag, and the little money these families could scrape together for more. And I will be damned, sir, before I hand a child's life to a man on a horse who wants to spend it on whiskey." Della Burke pressed a cloth to the cut at the woman's temple. "Let me carry that heavy bag inside for you, dear," she said gently. "You've had a fright." "I'll carry my own bag," said Dr. Adeline Carver, and picked it up. Cedar Bluffs was a town holding its breath. Wade saw it the moment they came down the main street in the late light, the shutters drawn in the middle of the afternoon, the schoolhouse dark, a knot of men outside the church who stopped talking when the coach passed. There was a smell over the place that he knew from cattle and dreaded in people, the close, sour smell of sick rooms kept too long shut. Somewhere a woman was keening, the low, steady sound of a mother who has been crying for days and has learned to do it quietly. Diphtheria, Della told him low, so the doctor wouldn't hear her say it like a death sentence. It had come in on a freighter's family a month back and gone through the children like fire through dry grass. 4 buried already. 6 more abed. The town's only medical man was Horace Prout, who kept the apothecary and had set bones and pulled teeth for 20 years and had decided, somewhere in those 20 years, that this made him the equal of any college. Prout met them at the boarding house, and he did not offer to carry the bag. "So," he said, looking the doctor over the way a man looks over a horse he has already decided not to buy, "the famous physician from the East, a woman." He let the word sit there. "I'll tell you plain, ma'am, I sent no wire. Whoever did had no authority. We've a system here and it's been working." "You 4 graves," Addie said. The men around Prout shifted. One of them, a rancher with a face like a clenched fist, said the council would have to meet on it. There would have to be an examination, he said, before any stranger laid hands on the town's children, questions, credentials, a vouching. It was, Wade thought, a polite way of saying they did not trust her and meant to make her stand in a parlor and earn the right to help people die a little slower. She stood in the parlor and earned it. Wade had no place there and went anyway, hat in his hands by the door, and he watched her answer Prout's questions one after another in that measured voice, never rising to his bait, never letting them see the thing Wade had already seen on the road, that she knew exactly how bad it was, that she had counted the abed and done the arithmetic of who would live. "How would you treat the obstruction?" Prout demanded. "When the throat closes and the breath can't pass? You'd bleed them, I suppose. Eastern nonsense." "No," she said. "I'd open the windpipe below the obstruction and let the air in until the membrane slews and the child can breathe on his own. It is the last resort, and it is a hard thing to watch. But it is breath, Mr. Prout, and a frightened child against a hard thing that works is better than a comfortable child against a gentle thing that doesn't." The room went quiet. Prout had no answer to it. The council voted 4-2 to let her work. It was not a welcome. It was a door held open by men who expected to be proven right when she failed. Wade told himself he stayed in town for the cattle. The truth was the cattle were sold, the crew paid off and drifting, and there was nothing holding him in Cedar Bluffs but a sound he couldn't shake and a woman who would not let anyone carry her bag. He took a room over the livery and found reasons. He mended the station fence for End Burke. He hauled water to the houses where the children lay, because the families were exhausted and afraid, and a strong back asks no questions. And every house he carried water to, he found her already there or just gone, sleeves rolled, that bag open on the table. She caught him at it one evening, sitting on the Hollies' porch in the cold while inside she worked over their boy, little Samuel, 7 years old and laboring at each breath. She came out to clear her lungs of the sick room and found Wade on the step with an empty bucket. "You don't have to do this," she said. "It's not your town." "Wasn't yours either," he said, 3 days ago." She almost smiled. She sat down on the step a careful distance from him, and for a while neither said anything, and the stars came out hard and closed the way they do over the high plains in autumn. "My brother," Wade said at last. He didn't know he was going to say it until it was said. Younger than me. Took a fever when we were boys down in Texas. There was a doctor a day's ride off and he wouldn't come, said the roads were bad and we were nobody and the fee wasn't worth the horse. He turned the bucket handle in his hands. I've thought about that bag of yours all week. How you wouldn't let it go even getting dragged through the dirt. I never saw anybody hold onto something like that for somebody else's children. He looked at her. That's the reason, in case you were wondering why a drover keeps turning up with water. She was quiet a moment. I came, she said, because a man I'd never met sent a telegram to a hospital that wasn't even mine, asking for anyone, and I read it pinned to a board, and I realized there was nowhere I'd rather be than the one place I was actually needed. She looked down at her reddened hands. I'm not brave, Mr. Tanner. I'm just unwilling to be useless. People mistake the one for the other. No, Wade said. I heard you on that road. It wasn't the one of being useful I heard. She didn't answer that. But she didn't move away, either, and they sat together in the cold until the Holly's boy's mother called her back inside. Frank Dyer had not ridden off for good. Men like Dyer never did, not while they believed there was money on the table they'd been cheated of. He came back into Cedar Bluffs on a market morning when the street had people in it, which was its own kind of arrogance. The road agent walking his horse down the main street of the town he'd robbed on the road, two of his men trailing, faces uncovered now and ordinary, which was somehow worse. Wade was loading flour onto the Burke's wagon when he saw them, and he set the sack down slow. Dyer found the doctor outside the apothecary. He swung down easy and put himself in her path, close, the way a man does when he means a woman to feel how much larger he is. That bag, Dyer said pleasantly. Heard tell it's full of money, town's relief fund, they say. Hundreds of dollars folks scraped up for medicine. He smiled. Now a sensible woman should understand that money's just sitting in a war zone, robbers about, roads dangerous, be a shame if it got lost, safer with men who know how to keep it. Step back, Addie said. Or what? He reached for the bag. Or you'll answer to me. Wade's voice came from behind him, low and unhurried, and Dyer turned to find the drover standing easy with his coat pushed back off his hip. Wade had not raised his hand. He did not need to. There was a stillness in him that men who lived by violence recognized in one another, and Dyer recognized it now. This isn't your fight, cowboy. Lady's a doctor, Wade said. She's keeping this town's children breathing. That makes it everybody's fight, and the first one who lays a hand on that bag is going to find out how much of one. He let it sit. Now you can ride out and work some other line, Dyer, or you can stay and learn this town the hard way. Your choice. For a long moment the street held its breath again, the way the whole town had been holding it for a month. Then Dyer spat in the dust and stepped back, and his smile was gone but his eyes weren't. Money's still out there, he said. Out there's a long ride from here, plenty of road between. He mounted, wheeled his horse, and was gone, his men behind him. Wade let his breath out. Beside him, the doctor's hands were steady, but he saw what it cost to keep them so. You should have let me carry that bag a long time ago, he said, trying for lightness. I'll carry my own bag, she said, and this time it came out almost like a laugh, almost like the start of trust. The trouble was that fear and grief make people cruel, and Horace Prout knew where to aim them. He called it a town meeting. He framed it as concern for the families, for the order of things, for the danger of a stranger frightening sick households with talk of cutting children's throats. The church filled with worn-out people looking for someone to blame, because blaming the sickness gave them nothing to hold. Prout gave them a target. She speaks of cutting, he told them, his voice grave and kindly and poisonous. Of taking a knife to a child's neck. I ask you, neighbors, is that medicine, or is it butchery dressed in a Philadelphia coat? I have served this town 20 years. She has served it 2 weeks, and in those 2 weeks the dying has not stopped. The dying slowed, said a voice, and it was Della Burke on her feet, color high. Ask the Ray's family whose girl was abed a week ago and sat up taking broth this morning. Ask them whose medicine did that. Ask me, said another woman, standing, Mrs. Ray's herself, twisting her apron. I won't say the words as fine as Mr. Prout, but that woman sat with my inacutes 3 nights and never once slept, and Mr. Prout sold me a tonic that did nothing and charged me for it. She sat down shaking. Wade stood then, because he found he could not stay sitting. He was no speaker. He turned his hat in his hands and said the only thing he had. I'm not from here, he said. I came through with cattle and I stayed, and I've carried water to about every house with a sick child in it this past 2 weeks. I've seen her in all of them. I've seen Mr. Prout in none. He let that land. You all want somebody to be angry at. I understand it. But you're fixing to run off the one person who came when you called, and she came when nobody made her, when there was nothing in it for her but hard work and your suspicion. Out here a person's measured by what they do. By that measure, I don't know a finer one in this room. The vote, when it came, was not close. The council affirmed Dr. Carver's authority over the sick rooms and asked Prout, with cold courtesy, to assist or stand aside. It was the town's first real turning. But it was words, and Wade knew, watching her face, that she knew it too, that words would mean nothing at all if the next hard night went the wrong way. The next hard night was the Holly's boy. It came the way she'd said it would, fast and terrible. Wade was at the livery when the pounding came on the door, Samuel's father with no coat and no color, saying the boy couldn't breathe at all. Wade ran for the doctor and the doctor ran for the bag, and they reached the Holly's house to find 7-year-old Samuel arched on the bed, eyes wide, mouth working, and no air going in or out. The membrane in his throat had closed it like a fist. Lamp, Addie said. Every lamp in the house, on the table, now. She swept the table clear with her arm and they laid the boy on it. Hold him. You, to the father, hold his head still, don't let him thrash. Mr. Tanner, your hands, you've held animals steady. Hold his shoulders. Horace Prout was there too. Somebody had fetched him, or he'd come on his own to see her fail. He stood at the edge of the lamplight with his bag of tonics, and he did not move, because there was nothing in 20 years of pulling teeth that had prepared him for a child turning gray in front of him. Addie's hands went into the black bag and came out with bright steel. Her voice when she spoke was perfectly level, and Wade understood that the levelness was the bravest thing in the room. Samuel, she said to the boy close to his ear, I know it's frightening. I'm going to make a little door so the air can come in. It will hurt for one moment and then you will breathe. I promise you'll breathe. Look at the man holding your shoulders. Keep your eyes on him. The boy's terrified eyes fixed on Wade. Wade made his own face into the calmest thing he had ever made it, and held the small body still, and did not look away. She found the place by feel below the closed throat, and she opened it, a small clean cut. Then the steel, then a tube of polished metal sliding home, and for one endless second nothing happened, and Prout made a low sound of horror. And then the boy's chest heaved and a whistle of air went into him, a real breath, then another, dragging and ragged and alive. Samuel Holly's breathed. His color crept back from gray to merely pale. His mother dropped to her knees by the table and wept into his hair, and his father was saying thank you, over and over to no one and everyone. In the corner, Horace Prout was crying without any sound at all. After a long moment he came forward, and he did not say he was sorry, because some men cannot, but he picked up the strip of clean cloth she would need next, and he held it out to her, his hands shaking. What do you require, doctor? He said. It was the closest thing to an apology a man like that had in him, and she took it for what it was. Hold the lamp steady, she said gently, and help me watch him. It'll be a long night. Word of the long night ran through Cedar Bluffs faster than the sickness ever had. By morning the whole town knew that the Holly's boy was breathing, that the woman doctor had done the very thing Prout had called butchery, and that Prout himself had held the lamp. Something turned over in the town that no vote could have turned. Which was, of course, exactly when Frank Dyer made his last play for the money. He'd waited, Wade figured later, for the town to be at its lowest, and instead he came in on the morning it was rising, which was his mistake. He hit the bank end of the street with his two men, meaning to take the relief fund the families had finally pooled into the strongbox now that they trusted it would buy real medicine. But Cedar Bluffs that morning was not a town holding its breath. It was a town that had gotten one back, and was not in a mood to lose anything more. Marshal Reese had the front of it and Wade had the side, and half the men of the town came out of the doorways with whatever they'd grabbed, and it was over almost before it was a fight. Dyer found himself ringed exactly the way he'd ringed a coach on a lonely road, except that there was nowhere here to scatter to, and these were not frightened passengers. One of his men ran, the other put his hands up. Dyer reached, the way such men always reach one time too many, and Wade put him on the ground with the flat efficiency of someone who'd wrestled steers a great deal larger and a great deal angrier. They marched him to the territorial jail and wired for the federal man. The strongbox stayed shut. The money, $311, every cent of it scraped from people who had almost nothing, stayed in Cedar Bluffs, where it bought a winter's worth of medicine and the start of something better. Wade found the doctor at the station afterward, sitting on the same bench where she'd set a driver's shoulder her first hour in town. She looked up at him, exhausted to the bone and somehow lit from within. "It's over," he said. "This part," she said, "the sickness will burn out now. The worst is behind." She looked at her hands. "I keep thinking I should be going. There's always somewhere needing a doctor." "There's somewhere needing one right here," Wade said. She stayed. She told herself it was the work, and it was the work partly. Cedar Bluffs had no clinic and no proper physician, and 100 miles in every direction of families who'd learned that month exactly what it cost to have neither. There was a building to be had, the old assay office, empty since the strike played out. And the town that had once made her stand in a parlor to prove herself now could not give it to her fast enough. Horace Prout himself donated the shelving and learned, at 60, to take instruction from a woman 30 years his junior, and was the better man for it. But it was not only the work, and they both knew it. Wade Tanner did not go back to the trail. He'd been on it 15 years, and he found, to his own surprise, that he was done, that a man could move cattle his whole life, and never once feel the thing he felt hauling water up a sick child's steps, the thing of being needed in a place instead of merely passing through it. He bought a small spread east of town with the cattle money, near enough to ride in of an evening, and he came in most evenings, and nobody in Cedar Bluffs pretended to be surprised by it. He asked her the way he did most things, plainly, on the steps of the new clinic, with the autumn coming round again to where it had started. "I'm no good at saying things," he said, "so I'll say it crooked and you'll have to make it straight. I don't want to court you the way the books say, with calling hours and a year of it. I'm too old and you're too busy. I want to build something with you. Your work and mine, side by side, both of us still ourselves. Equals. I'd be a fool to ask you to be less than you are. I heard you on that road, remember. I wouldn't change a word of it." She was quiet, and then she laughed, low, the way she'd laughed the first time she half-trusted him. "You should have let me carry that bag," she said. "It would have saved us both a great deal of trouble." "You'd never have let me," Wade said, "and I'd never have wanted you to." They were married in the spring in the clinic she'd built, by a circuit preacher, with Della Burke crying openly and Horace Prout standing up stiff and proud as a man at his own daughter's wedding, and 7-year-old Samuel Hollies, breathing fine and loud as any boy in the territory, appointed himself to carry the rings on a cushion and nearly dropped them twice. The clinic became the finest between two railheads. Adeline Carver trained 2 other women in it before she was through, and they rode out to towns that had once turned women doctors away in the dark, and the territory was different for it in 100 small ways that never made the newspapers. Wade ran his spread and helped her haul water to whatever house needed it, because some habits a man keeps, and they raised children of their own under that hard, close ceiling of stars. And years later, when somebody new to Cedar Bluffs would ask how the famous Dr. Carver had ever come to settle in so small a place, the old-timers would tell it the same way every time. They'd tell about the robbed stage and the road agents, and the bag she would not let go of even dragged through the dirt, and the shout that carried a quarter mile to where a drover sat his horse. "You'll have to kill me first. There are children dying." They tell how the bandit had ridden up expecting tears, the way bandits do, expecting a frightened woman to hand over her treasure and weep, and how he'd gotten instead a defiance that brought a cowboy down off a hill at a dead run. And they'd tell, last of all and best of all, that the treasure in the bag had never been gold at all. It had been medicine, and a little borrowed money, and the plain stubborn refusal of one person to be useless, while a child still had a breath left to fight for. That, the old-timers would say, was the whole of it. Not the falling in love, though that was fine. The recognition. A man who heard a shout and knew exactly what kind of soul made it and rode toward it instead of away. And a woman who'd held onto the right thing so hard that holding on became the truest word that the high plains ever taught either of them. It all began because Adeline Carver refused to let go of what was never even hers to keep. And it never, not once in all the long good years that followed, occurred to her to regret it.